Food is something we all enjoy, but have you ever thought about the history of food? In this Magis podcast episode, Spicing Up the History of Food, we will be following along in a dialogue with Carrie Rizzuto and Dr. Julie Gibert. They discuss course History 220 about how our food was impacted by European food history and the importance of spices in the spice trade. My name is Shania Clark, and you're listening to Spicing Up the History of Food on the Magis podcast.
In some ways, I want to say that the history of food is important because for some, it's a way that some people get into history, even if they might not think they're interested in other historical topics. Mm-hmm. But I think also, in a more specific sense, I think it's important because the ethics and justice of how we handle food is still very important. A lot of what we think of as American dishes were European before they were American. I mean, the obvious example there is apple pie.
It's interesting to see how the culture of Europe ended up traveling to America.
Our sense of how we set the table, what things go together and what don't. The fact that we tend to eat savory things during the meal and sweet things after the meal. A lot of those are assumptions that emerged in the course of European history, and we still stick to them. The big impact of spices, apart from just on flavor and taste, is the effect on trade routes. There were regions which only developed worldwide trade because they had spice crops. When you have whole populations who are being put to work in spice fields, people whose entire life as a people was shaped by the need to provide labor for sugar plantations. We don't think of waffles as fast food, but they were sold in markets and you could just grab them and eat them. When most Americans hear the term fast food, they think of a hamburger and French fries. Yeah. And they think of a place like McDonald's. They don't necessarily think of a street stall. They think of a purpose-built building that's made to produce those fast meals. I think that's very American.
It's interesting that you mentioned the stalls where it's like you just grab and go type deal. Like, I never really considered that fast food myself, even though really it is kind of quicker than a McDonald's if you think about it.
I think it's because we almost say fast food with two capital F's, and we mean something very specific.
Mm-hmm. Is it fast food because it's made fast or gotten to you fast, or is it fast food because it's McDonald's, Burger King, and all that?
You can listen and subscribe to this episode at the Magis podcast on Spotify.